thy infinite wisdom and providential goodness, has appointed the offices of rulers and councils for the welfare of society and the just government of man. We beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor as thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of such important trust in the Commonwealth of Dominica. Let thy blessing descend upon us here in this Parliament assembled, and grant that we may, as in thy presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interest thou hast committed to our charge. All which we ask in the name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Mr. Speaker, good morning. I beg to move that the Standing Orders 7.1, 7.2, which relate to sitting of members, be suspended.
Mr. Speaker.
Been moved second, so it has moved that Standing Order 7.1, 7.2, which relate to the sitting of members, be suspended. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Obituary and congratulatory remarks.
Mr. Speaker, we mourn the passing of the mother of Senator John Finn, Helen Tousse, the mother of the Honorable Danny Lugay, the Rosa North MP, Mary Letham Lugay, and the sister of Honorable Hector John, Member of Parliament, Dawes. We extend our very deepest condolences and our best wishes for strength and courage to the families in this time of bereavement. Mr. Speaker, I too want to extend our condolences to Honorable Lugay on the passing of his mother. I had the occasion to have met her a few times. May her soul rest in peace. And also to Honorable John Finn on the passing of her mother. May her soul rest in peace. And to Honorable John on the passing of his sister. May her soul rest in peace. We pray that the Lord will strengthen them and strengthen their families as they go through this, for their mourning phase, and the Lord will give them courage to deal with the loss. No words can really set aside the emotional nature and experience, but they should be rest assured that they will be comforted with our thoughts and prayers.
I would extend condolences to both the honorable members and the passing of their family. Specifically, Honorable Danny Lugay, I go way back with the family, went to school with his brothers and sisters and his sisters, so I would like to extend my condolences from myself and my family.
Confirmation of minutes.
Cross-check. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the minutes of the meeting of Monday, 26 April 2021 be confirmed as circulated.
Mr. Speaker.
For the confirmation of the minutes. Question 3, standing in my name, and question 4, standing in the name of the member for Rosa North constituency, Honorable Daniel Luge, on the order paper for oral answer at the last sitting of the Parliament, were not answered because the time allotted for oral answers to questions expired. The rules provide that not more than half an hour, that's Standing Order 25, not more than half an hour shall be allotted to oral answers to questions on any day. Questions so requiring an oral answer, which have not received an oral answer within the period, shall be dealt with as in paragraph 4 of Standing Order 24, manner of asking and answering questions, unless the member asking such a question has given instructions for the question to be deferred to a future meeting. I have not given any instructions for the question standing in my name, question 3, on the order paper for the last sitting of the Parliament in April to be deferred to a future sitting. And Standing Order 24.4 provides, quote, other questions shall be answered in writing by the minister to whom the question was addressed, and copies of the answer shall be sent to the clerk, who shall send a copy to the member in whose name the question stood upon the order paper, and cause the answer to be circulated with the minutes of proceedings. We have received the minutes of proceedings for the meeting of the 26th of April. There is no answer to the question I submitted for oral answer, which was on the order paper, nor is there any answer to the question that the Honorable Daniel Luge submitted and was in his name on the order paper, question 4, at the last sitting of Parliament. And it seems to me that there's something irregular about these minutes because of the absence of these questions, the answers to these questions that are supposed to be circulated with the minutes of proceedings for the statute.
Okay, honorable member, you asked which one? 2 questions for oral. You asked one. The Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, responded, but it went to about 30 minutes and time was extended. The second one, you said that you withdrew.
I'm not referring to that question. I'm referring to question 3 on the order paper for the last sitting of Parliament, which was addressed to the Minister for National Security. And according to the rules, because time had expired on the questioning period, the minister was required to let me, as the person in whose name the question stood, have a written answer to that response, to that question. And the clerk was mandated under the rules to circulate the written answer with the minutes of the proceedings of the meeting on the 26th of April. I want to remind this Honorable House that those questions were posed more than 14 days in advance of the meeting on the 26th of April. And to come now to June, where we're having the follow-up meeting of Parliament, and we still don't have an answer to those questions, we need to resolve it. And I'm suggesting, Mr. Speaker, that we suspend the sitting of the House to allow the minister and the ministers to fulfill their responsibility to the Parliament. We can suspend the House for half an hour, allow the ministers to go get the answers to the questions, because these questions were asked a long time ago.
Yes, honorable member, I heard what you said. Unless if the minutes really is incorrect, I remember clearly that you said you withdraw all your questions. And therefore, hold on, I did something which is unusual, but I thought at the time it was in the public's interest to at least do the first one. So I repeated it and I said it was not your question anymore. I'm just repeating it because I think it would be unfair to the executive branch to spend hours and days preparing for something, although the rules allow that you can withdraw at any time. But I think because of the nature of the question, I thought that with that length of preparation, that the responder should respond to the question, at least just in the public interest and for the information of the Honorable House, which is unusual, but I thought that just in that wisdom, I wanted to allow that. But the others, I did not went on to deal with them. But unless you can tell me that you did not say that you withdraw all questions, then we cannot go in your line of argument.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about different things, you know. I'm not talking about the question from the Prime Minister to the Prime Minister, which I withdrew that you read. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about question number 3 on the order paper, in my name, posed to the Minister for National Security. That question for oral answer was not answered because the time allotted for oral answers to questions had expired. And the rules provide how that answer should be dealt with in the circumstances where the time expired. And just again, it says in paragraph 4, other questions, which category this one falls, shall be answered in writing by the minister to whom the question was addressed. The question was addressed to the National Security Minister. And copies of the answer shall be sent to the clerk, who shall send a copy to the member in whose name the question stood upon the order paper, and cause the answer to be circulated with the minutes of proceedings. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that this situation is relevant for both the question from the Honorable Danny Luge to the Prime Minister, which was question 4 on the order paper, and the question from your humble servant to the Minister of National Security, question number 3 on the order paper.
Are the facts correct? Was it because of expiration of time, or was it for some other reason that the question wasn't answered? My understanding was for some other reason, and therefore, if that's the case, you can't rely on this provision, even if the interpretation of that action were to be correct.
Can I also add, Mr. Speaker, Section 24.4 is very clear on that matter. Most times, even in this parliament before, if you ask a question, even it's oral, you get a response in writing from the minister or the relevant minister or the Prime Minister. Question was asked. Even the first question, he's not even asking about the first question and the second one. He's asking about the third one and the one with Mr. Danny Luge. These questions have not been answered. Mr. Speaker, I've seen it happen on several occasions. Questions are asked in this House to relevant ministers, and we are not getting answers. Mr. Can I help? Mr. Speaker, all of these things have to be placed in context, and the facts surrounding this context must be clearly stated. You will have a maximum of 30 minutes for questions. 30 minutes for questions. When that time elapses, the House can extend the time by way of a motion, and majority vote will allow the motion to carry. That has happened many times, where extra time is given. placing a question on the other paper, Mr. Speaker, you must stand on your feet as the person asking the question, who placed the question on the other paper, to ask the minister, even if it's for oral or written response, you must stand on your feet to ask the question. It is like a bill. Listen. It's like a bill. If you have a bill in your name, Mr. Need to have everything is said in there, and it is there. So what needs to be happening is that, Mr. Speaker, is that when you put the question on other people, you must stand on your feet to ask the question. If you abandon the question, if you refuse to ask the question, or time has elapsed, it is not automatic that it be transferred to the next meeting. No, but you, that's what I'm saying. Let us put this stuff in different categories. They're different. Let us not confuse all of the issues.
Member,
Let's not confuse the
hold
facts.
on, Prime Minister. I gave everyone an opportunity to speak. I will not allow anybody to be disturbing a member while he's on his feet. So, if you want to interject, you humbly ask, and we may allow you. But when the Honorable Prime Minister or any other member is speaking, please allow them to speak. We have to get discipline in this house. So are you standing on your feet? You want to make a point? Your mic. Yes, I recognize you now.
Mr. Speaker, the concerns we are raising on this side is getting the answers to the questions asked in Parliament according to the standing orders. Mr. Speaker, being in Parliament or walking out or time elapsed, question was asked. One question in 30 minutes, even I get extended time to answer that question. So what you're saying, the other questions that the Honorable Danny Lugie asked, and the leader of the opposition asked, should not get answered, should not be answered? It should be there. Mr. Speaker, I have asked questions in this House, oral questions. I got oral answers and still got written answers to it, to that same question. I have done it on several occasions in this honorable House. It comes with the pack, it comes with it. On several occasions, Mr. Speaker. Oh, what is the question? Mr. Prime Minister, you're talking about transparency, accountability. That is where it starts. That when we ask questions in Parliament, we should be able to get timely answers. In accordance with the rule.
See, can I?
Yes.
You see, when we're making a case on a matter, we must present the facts related to the matter. Bringing peripheral issues to it is not going to solve the issue. When we give a written response or copy, we really go in the extra mile. That is unmandated. The minutes, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the minutes, that's it. If you look at the minutes of the last meeting, you will see the detailed response to the questions asked in this House. If you you have to understand the fundamental point. If a member sends a notice to the clerk to place these questions on the other paper, and that member does not show up, or that member walks out, or that member abandons this question in exasperation or in frustration, or because he figures he doesn't want further embarrassment for the responses that were given, then the minister is not obligated in law to answer whether orally or in writing. And therefore, so even if the minister took on his own volition and sends a copy to the clerk cannot include it in the minutes because it was not in the House. Because there's no question asked by the member. Yes, it is in the order paper. But the question was not, the member must stand on his feet. I cannot sit and present a bill, Mr. Speaker. No, I must stand. And I must read the statement introducing the bill and then we go to debate, and then we go to committee stage, and then we come back to the full house for the ratification of the committee. The question, when the question is sent, whether it's for oral or written response, you must ask it so that the records, it will show at what time, when during this thing. So the response on the airport, Mr. Speaker, it is contained from page 9 to page 21. The most comprehensive response to a question in the history of Parliament. Stating all the facts. So all is there. Then Mr. Linton walked out. He went out. He went to Q95. He did not stay to ask the question or to beg of the Parliament extra time.
So allow a last intervention, and then I'm going to rule on the matter.
Yeah, I have a slight issue, Mr. Speaker. I keep they're pulling down my mask and putting it back up. What is the protocol in the Parliament? Do we wear masks or not? What is? I can. Because I noticed that the Prime Minister was in Venezuela recently, COVID high risk. He came back on Friday. Did you quarantine? Did you go into quarantine? No, I'm asking a question. Did you go into quarantine?
But sit down.
Have you been medically cleared?
But sit down. Sit down. Let me ask the question. Sit down.
I want to hear that.
Mr. I followed the protocol fully. Before I took PCR, I came back, I went to quarantine. I came back, they did the PCR test. This thing is very evasive, you know, especially in the nose. And furthermore, I am fully vaccinated. Are you fully vaccinated? Yes. Yes, great. You took your Dominica. I see.
I didn't tell you what vaccination I took. I told you I'm fully vaccinated.
Yes, so
so Speaker, Minister.
But thanks for the concern.
Minister placed on the record that having come back from Venezuela on Friday, which was his day 0, he spent Saturday and Sunday in quarantine, and today is the day he should have gotten his results. He must have got it early this morning. Oh, I didn't say that.
Mr. Linton, please.
But the protocol,
please.
But the protocol is clear. You said he meant the protocol.
Okay, member. Let us stick on the matter at hand.
Mr. Speaker, back to the question.
Yes, nice light and spirit, but let us stick on the matter at hand.
Mr. Speaker, back to the question. The Honorable Minister, this is the minute, sir, of the meeting, rose on a point of clarification. The Honorable Prime Minister then drew to the attention of the chair that if questions were to continue, a motion for extension of time had to be moved. The Honorable Prime Minister also said that the time allocated for questions, 30 minutes, had expired long time ago. Who expired it? He. The Honorable Speaker, in reply, said it was up to the House to decide whether to proceed with the other questions. It was up to the House to decide whether to proceed with the other questions. The Honourable Speaker, after he had waited for a few minutes, asked the House to proceed to the next item on the order paper. That is the record of the proceedings. So, question number 3 on the order paper was never called. Time expired, it was never called. And so, what happens from there?
Okay.
What happens from there, Mr. Speaker?
Okay, both Honorable Blackmore, you can take your seat. Honorable Linton, take your seat, please. Oh, I'm going to rule on the matter. I'm going to rule on the matter because I don't want the House to end up in disrepute. So no, Honorable Blackmore, it's okay. So listen.
On the floor. Let him complete this point, Mr. Speaker.
Listen.
Allow the member to complete this point,
Take
Mr.
your
Speaker.
seat. I don't know why you always getting on as if you're angry.
Yes,
Just
I am angry
take your
because
seat.
nonsense that happening
Take
in the
your
House
seat.
right now. The gentleman is standing to make his point. Allow him to complete his point.
I asked the Honorable Minister of National Security to take his seat. He took his seat.
He was not speaking. The gentleman was completing his. The leader of the opposition was completing his point. You put up the mic if you want. We have to stop that nonsense in the House. The leader of the opposition have not completed his point. If the Prime Minister
I would ask you to take your seat, please. I would ask you to take your seat. I would ask you to take your seat, please. I'm going to rule on the matter. We don't have 10, 20 speakers in this honorable House. We have one. One. Honorable Hector John, please cease from disturbing this honorable House. You see, that is where the problem is, you know. Anyway, I'm going to rule on the matter. We are on the minutes. I have listened to both sides in this debate, on this discussion, and I'm ruling that we proceed with the order paper and go back to the decision of adopting the minutes. Because so far, in the discussion and based on the rules, I agree that if you did not get the opportunity to place your question on the table and or you withdraw your question, then it cannot be reflected as part of the minutes. You have an opportunity if you think that in terms of the administrative ruling or the approach, you could ask the same question. So let us proceed in regards to the minutes.
Respect, Mr. Speaker, this ruling is a gross violation of the standing orders of the House. The standing orders of the House clearly provide what should happen in a situation where there is a question on the order paper for oral answer, which was not called by you, the Speaker, because time had elapsed for question.
That is not true. That's not true.
It's not true. But the minutes.
No. Take your seat. Let me just explain. No. You made your point.
Here's the minutes of the meeting.
You made your point. Let me just remind you.
Mr. Speaker, if you'll allow me, here are the minutes of the meeting. The minutes of the meeting record what happened.
Okay, you want to take your seat so I could respond to that? Because I've already ruled. But let me just respond. When we were in this honorable House, you'd remember on the second question you asked, when you were not happy with how it went, you left. You left.
Left where? Left where, Mr. Speaker? Left where?
This honorable House, you left.
Talking about minutes of the meeting, the YouTube video. I left the House after my comments on the supplementary estimates. The question was not abandoned. The question posed to the member for Maho, the Minister for National Security, was not called. I did not withdraw the question. That's absolute garbage. Go back to the YouTube video.
Okay, as a compromise, have you seen? As a compromise, hear what I'm saying. We are going to proceed with the minutes unless, if you can tell me why this debate will impact the minutes. And if, when we break later, listen, the rules still stand. If, after research and discussion, we think that is an error, we will ensure that you get the response. But I'm ruling that we are proceeding on the matter, and we can, at any time in this honorable House, come back to the matter. So if you are genuinely interested in a resolution, you would allow it to proceed. So I'm saying, let us proceed with the minutes, and we could always come back to this matter if we need a point of clarification in a bilateral when we suspend the House. So let us proceed, please. Let us proceed.
Good morning, everybody. Mr. Speaker, I have a short amendment on page 52 of the minutes, where it says the act to amend the Solid Waste Management Act. The question was proposed and no debate took place. That's not correct. Not a correct reflection of what occurred. I voiced my concerns on that particular suggestions, recommendations. Also, the Prime Minister also made some comments on that. I would beg to amend.
So yes, so say exactly what you want to amend. That is page
52.
Yes. So say exactly
where it says the question was proposed and there's no amendment. Yeah, I would suggest we add the question was proposed and debate took place. Senator Masler spoke and Honorable Prime Minister spoke. That just this slight amendment.
Okay, so is this correct? Yes, I think it was correct, yes. So we'll accept this amendment. Any other comment, any other amendments? Okay. No other amendments? Okay. So let's see. We are on the confirmation of the minutes. If there are no other amendments, I'd move that somebody move that the minutes be adopted as amended.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the minutes be adopted as amended.
It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of the meeting of Monday, 26 April 2021 be adopted as amended. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Yes, it has been moved and seconded that the minutes be confirmed as amended. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Announcements by Speaker.
I have a few announcements to be made here. I would like to report to this Honorable House that the Standing Orders Committee met twice to discuss and deliberate on the parliamentary resolution of the meeting of the 26th April 2021. And it reads, just to remind us, to amend the standing orders of the House of Assembly in the Commonwealth of Dominica to expressly provide for the entitlement of payment of salary of an elected representative and or a senator to be calculated from the day after the poll at which he or she is elected or the day after the date on which he or she is appointed, as the case may be. I would like to report that the work mandated by the committee of the whole House has not yet been completed, so work is ongoing. I would like to also, that's just a second announcement there. Yes.
In respect to the commencement of the payment of salaries, I'm of the view that the Standing Orders Committee should look at this even more broadly than this. Now, I want to be advised, do we do we submit an amendment to the task given to the Standing Orders Committee, or can a member write to the chairman asking for these other matters to be considered? Because one of the matters I would like to be considered by the Standing Orders Committee in respect to these salaries is the abandonment of Parliament, the abandoning of Parliament during a meeting. If you do not sit here or you just walk out and you don't come back, should you get paid? And should there be a deduction in your pay? Because we have to bring a level of discipline. Because there's no other place in the world where you can walk out in your job and still keep the job and still get paid. And I think if this is the highest court in the land, then we must set the example. There is a process in law which allows members to be absent, and we have to follow the law. And the question is, I think there has to be some clarity, because there are some jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker, that if you don't show up, you don't get paid, unless you have a permission from the Speaker. Only the Speaker can grant you permission to be excused from the House. So I'm not sure whether you want to guide me on the Attorney General, Honorable Attorney General, as to how do we go about giving that additional mandate to the Standing Orders Committee.
Mr. Speaker, that would have to be by way of the House. So really, ordinarily, it's a motion of the House to instruct the Standing Orders Committee to consider this or any other proposal. As I understand the Honourable Prime Minister correctly, what he's proposing is an amendment to the Standing Orders. Matters of salary is already before the Standing Orders Committee, so it may be that during the course of this sitting, and a motion could be moved that the Standing Orders Committee, in addition to X that it's already considering, consider Y, Z, whatever other amendments that are deemed appropriate.
So at this stage, this proceeding, we could maybe, again, when we break, we could discuss it in a bilateral. Maybe both the Honourable Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, we could have a short discussion on the matter, and then we can proceed. I would like to just remind members of this Honourable House that the rules, that's the standing order, allow for the submission of questions in advance of notice of a meeting or a sitting. That there, I mean, even when Speaker Emerita was there, I remember we had a long-standing practice where she admonished us to, we can bring the questions in early. So I would just like to remind members of that, and I would like to also shed some light on that matter, to just remind this Honourable House that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition submitted his questions to this Honourable House or through the Speaker, the Clerk, on February 3rd. That is for the last sitting, and the sitting was on the 26th of April. That's like 82 days in advance of the sitting. I just wanted to just point that out, because sometimes we as members of this House, we need to really inform the public properly. So I just wanted to just point that out, and so that we can be guided. We can be guided. So, no, you misinterpret what I said. But anyway, in regards to my further announcement, we need to know, this Honourable House needs to know, really, which of the members who have been vaccinated and who have not been, but we'll do that in a private matter. So the clerk will discuss privately with you. That is in regards to the budget address. We'd like to resume to a level of normalcy where we can invite the wider public. So again, the clerk will contact members so we can know how we can fine-tune our protocol in this Honourable House. We would prefer that all members, if they have not taken their second dose, we advise that they take the second dose so we can go back to a level of normalcy. My last announcement there is during the course of the day, we will circulate some pointers from one of New Zealand documentary similar to Erskine May, in which some relevant points on the issue of debate as it regards to relevance to the debate and tedious repetition. Again, that is just information to all members of this Honorable House, that especially in regards to relevance. That is where sometimes I'll just point out that in regards to the budget address, we give members a lot of latitude. And to some extent, when we're dealing with supplementary estimates, depending on how the member approaches his debate or her debate. But in regards to a particular piece of legislation, I would advise members, first not to be in a level of contention, to remember the issue of relevance and tedious repetition. And again, a reminder in regards to matters that are sub judice, we need to avoid those matters as much as possible. So that's just some of those pointers and some of the things that I wanted to just point out to this Honorable House. Oh, on the announcement, I just wanted a final one. The Honorable Danny Luge asked that he be excused from this Honorable House. So permission is granted to him to be excused for the period in which he asked. Because he is out of state in regards to the matter dealing with his mom's death. Okay, let's proceed.
Government notices.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Fiscal Responsibility Act 2021, stand in the name of the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, on the order paper be withdrawn.
Speaker, I beg to notice at a later stage of proceedings, I will be taking all stages of the bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act 2021, standing in the name of the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, on the order paper.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at a later stage of the proceedings, I will be taking all stages of the bill shortly entitled International Business Companies IBC Repeal Act 2021, standing in the name of the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, on the order paper.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that the latter stage of the proceeding, I will be taking all stages of the bill standing shortly entitled, the Companies Amendment Act 2021, standing in my name on the order paper.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at a later stage of the proceedings, I will be taking all stages of the bill shortly entitled Dominica Hospitals Authority Amendment Act 2021, standing in my name on the order paper.
Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act 2021 be read a first time.
Honorable Douglas, I think you should move that a second time so we can actually vote on the matter.
Mr. Speaker.
In second?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Second?
No, Mr. Speaker, I withdraw it. I withdraw the bill. So there's no further proceedings. Sir.
Okay, let's proceed. Okay. The bill has been read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled International Business Companies IBC Repeal Act 2021 be read a first time.
International Business Company IBC Repeal Act 2021.
The bill has been read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Act 2021 be read the first time.
Indeed.
Companies Amendment Act 2021.
The bill has been read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Dominica Hospitals Act 2021 be read a first time.
Dominica Hospitals Act 2021.
Bill has been read a first time.
Public business, government business, motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move the second reading of the bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act 2021.
Seconded.
Mr. Speaker, in 2002, the government of Dominica gave its commitment to support the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, with its work on harmful tax practices by committing to the principles of transparency and effective exchange of information relevant to tax matters upon request. The OECD has developed international standards on transparency and exchange of information which has been endorsed globally. These standards include exchange of information on requests where it is foreseeably relevant to the administration and enforcement of the domestic laws of the treaty partners. B, no restrictions on exchange by reason or bank secrecy or domestic tax interest requirements. C, availability of reliable information and powers to obtain it. D, respect for taxpayers' rights. And E, strict confidentiality of information exchanged. The OECD has also developed a list of criteria which is used to measure countries' performance. These criteria covers tax transparency, fair taxation, and implementation of international standards designed to prevent tax-based erosion and profit shifting. The list of criteria has been revised several times. It was updated twice in 2020. The OECD Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information on Requests for Tax Purposes is responsible for assessing countries based on the criteria. Mr. Speaker, the Global Forum undertook a review of Dominica's systems in 2020 and reported in December 2020 that Dominica had moved from a largely compliant rating to a partially compliant rating. The forum made some recommendations to address the deficiencies, including the need for enhancements to Dominica's legislative and administrative framework. Mr. Speaker, following receipt of the partially compliant rating, government developed an action plan to address the outstanding matters. Government also immediately appointed a working group comprising officials of the Ministries of Finance and National Security and the Attorney General Chambers to work on the implementation of the action plan under the guidance of the Global Forum. Since then, government has taken a number of actions to address the administrative matters, including 1, the establishment of an international tax unit within the Inland Revenue Division with the additional staff positions. 2, the procurement of a new IT system which will better facilitate the automatic exchange of information between Dominica and other jurisdictions. 3, we have augmented the staff complement at the company's registry to assist in cleansing and updating the company's register. And 4, have put in place some additional manuals to formalize current procedures. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the legislation, a few amendments are required to 2 of Dominica's law, namely the Companies Act, Chapter 7804 of the 2017 Revised Laws of Dominica, and the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard, Act Number 6 of 2019. In the case of the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard Act, amendments are required to improve the requirements for reporting financial institutions to keep records on their due diligence and reporting procedures in line with the standard, and to extend the penalties for failures in respect of due diligence and record-keeping obligations. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, draft amendments to Section 2, 7, 16, and 19 of the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard, Act Number 6 of 2019 have been prepared and are being presented to Parliament today. The proposed amendments are as follows. Section 2 of the Act is amended by inserting the following new subsection 3. 3. For the purposes of the standard, the threshold for controlling ownership interests in a legal person is the threshold specified in Section 2 of the Anti-Money Laundering and Suppression of Terrorist Financing Code of Practice. Section 7 of the Act is amended in subsection 2 by deleting the figure 31 and substituting the figure 30. Section 16 of the Act is repealed and replaced by the following. If a person enters into any arrangements or engages in a practice, the main purpose or one of the main purposes of which can reasonably be considered to be to avoid an obligation imposed under this Act or regulations made under this Act, this Act and the regulations shall have effect as if the person had not entered into the arrangement or engaged in the practice. Section 19 of the Act is amended by inserting after subsection 3 the following new subsection 4. 4. Regulations made under this section may create offenses and may prescribe penalties, or the offenses on conviction of a fine not exceeding $25,000 or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 4 years. Parliament's approval of these amendments will assist Dominica in meeting its international tax obligations. Mr. Speaker, this is not a Dominica Labour Party government matter. This is a Dominica matter. Therefore, I look forward to the full support of every member of this honorable House. The bill cited as Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act 2021 is now commended to this honorable House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The bill is before the House for debate.
Speaker, if I like Honorable Minister for Tourism rightly said, Mr. Speaker, this is not Dominica, Mr. Speaker. We have no choice in this matter, basically, put simply, and I'm happy that the opposition is agreeing with us on this matter, because there are certain requirements in this globalized arrangement that we live in. We live in the world right now, Mr. Speaker, has become really a small village, and you cannot operate on your own as a nation. There are international obligations that are almost forced upon you, and I want to almost choose my words very wisely, Madam Speaker, as as a socialist thinking politician, Mr. Speaker, it is very difficult for small island developing states right now in this new dispensation to chart a course of development on their own and to almost determine their destiny as a developing state, Mr. Speaker, because the first world have certain requirements, and today with all of the connectivity you have in the world and all of the banking relations, Mr. Speaker, it's almost impossible for you to not comply and not adhere to those rules coming down on us. And I remember it was one late Prime Minister, well, not late, or one former Prime Minister who categorized the first world in their attitude towards the developing states, Mr. Speaker, in a less than complimentary manner, which I will not repeat here for diplomatic purposes, obviously, Mr. Speaker. But it brings to mind those statements, and you really have to think how small island developing states will be able, or even presently are able, to chart and to navigate their development course in such chirpy waters. But that is the way of the world. That is the way that the world has evolved. We have to comply, Mr. Speaker, if we want to continue to do business with the rest of the world, if we want to continue with the modernization of Dominica and be a partner with other players in the global space. And we really do not have a choice, Mr. Speaker, but to pass this measure before the House. So I want to support the measure and to just explain really in layman's language, because that's been a series of amendments that we have had to do to all pieces of legislation in Dominica. Almost every single piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, have come under amendments over the years, over the course of the years, dating back probably to the early part of the 2000s, Mr. Speaker, and we see the process continuing. And as the requirements continue to be handed down upon us, we in turn have to comply, like I said, if we want to continue to do business in the global space. So I want to support the motion before this Honorable House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I think the Honourable Member of Portsmouth and Minister of Trade summed it up nicely. It's part of globalism. From time to time, amendments like this are expected, and the main purpose of this amendment, as continuous amendments, is to avoid bank secrecy and tax evasion when foreigners do business with us. So as he rightly said, it is beyond our control, and we try our best to ensure that our country complies. And as you have seen, we have put in all the systems in place so we can move from partially compliant to being largely compliant. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
This concludes the debate. It has moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act 2021 be read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act 2021.
The bill now stands committed to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause. House is in committee. Common Reporting Standard Act to this House. House resumes. I have to report that the bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act 2021 passed the committee stage without amendment. The question is that the report of the committee on the bill be adopted. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act be read a third time and passed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act 2021 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information, Common Reporting Standard Amendment Act 2021.
The bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the second reading of the bill shortly entitled International Business Company IBC Bill 2021.
Seconded.
Mr. Speaker, the International Business Companies Act, IBC Act, was enacted in 1996 with the purpose of providing the legal framework for the introduction of new offshore services to Dominica. At that time,
the expectation was that for the creation of a new lucrative offshore services sector that would result in significant economic benefits for Dominica, both in terms of revenue to the country and increased job opportunities. Over the years, however, there have been several amendments to the Act, mainly to strengthen the framework for the supervision of these IBCs. In May of 2019, in order to meet its international tax obligations, Dominica also amended its laws to provide for the application of domestic tax laws to the IBCs. As of June 15, 2021, there were 20,588 IBCs registered in the Commonwealth of Dominica. The revenue generated from the sector over the past 5 years, which includes registration and license fees, payment for certificates, application and copies of amendments, and agent fees, amounted to 3.2 million EC dollars, at an average of $640,000 per year. Mr. Speaker, with very little economic return, the IBCs have exposed Dominica to operational, reputational, and regulatory risks. In addition, the Ministry of Finance, with its Financial Services Unit, and the Inland Revenue Division are required to supervise the activities of the IBCs and apply applicable tax laws. The latter is to be enforced if Dominica is to remain compliant with its international obligations. Most of the IBC operations are conducted outside of Dominica, and significant financial and human resources are required to effectively supervise and apply the domestic tax laws to this sector. In several instances, Mr. Speaker, the exact location of the IBCs is unknown to the agents. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet of the Commonwealth of Dominica took a decision to seek Parliament's approval to discontinue the current framework in which the IBC's operation will allow these IBCs, if inclined, to register under the Companies Act, Chapter 78(4) of the 2017 revised laws of Dominica. To implement this measure, the Cabinet has been advised that repeal of the IBC Act, Chapter 78(1) of 2017 revised laws of the Commonwealth of Dominica is required. Mr. Speaker, this bill is now being presented to the House, proposes to repeal the Act with effect from January 1st, 2022. January 1st, 2022, Mr. Speaker, is approximately 6 months from today. This 6-month period, that is from July 2021 to December 2021, is proposed to allow the registered IBC sufficient time to transition and to register companies under the Companies Act, Chapter 78(4) of the 2017 revised laws of Dominica. As provided for in Clause 4 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, it is proposed that, notwithstanding, and I quote, notwithstanding the repeal effected by Section 3, any obligation or penalty incurred by an international business company during the period of operation of the Act shall not be affected, and any investigation, legal proceeding, or remedy in respect thereof may be instituted, continued, or enforced, and such penalty imposed as if the Act had not been repealed. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we are proposing that Section 1, subsection 2 of the amendment be deleted and a new Clause 4 be added, which now deals with the transitional stage of the effecting of the repealing of the IBC Act. It is proposed that this be moved at the committee stage of the bill. Copies of these amendments should have been circulated to the members. Mr. Speaker, I present this bill to the House. Thanks.
The bill before the House for
Speaker, I thank all members of the House for supporting this bill. And just briefly, Mr. Speaker, this is yet again one of the measures that a mature and responsible government like that of the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica is undertaking. And I think the Honorable Ian Douglas, in his brief contribution, mentioned these measures as part of the international community, Mr. Speaker, and of course, given the concerns raised by the international community, the ECCB, the government is putting these measures in place, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled International Business Companies, that is IBCs, Repeal Act 2021, be read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
International Business Companies, IBC, Repeal Act 2021.
The bill now stands committed to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause. Is that House resumes, and I have to report that the bill shortly entitled International Business Companies Act, that is IBC Repeal Act 2021, passed the committee stage with amendments. The question is that the report of the committee on the bill be adopted. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled International Business Companies Repeal Act 2021 be read a third time and passed.
Seconded.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled International Business Companies IBC Repeal Act 2021 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
International Business Company IBC Repeal 2021.
The bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Companies Amendment Act 2021 be read a second time.
Seconded, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, as already mentioned by Honorable Dennis Charles during the presentation of the bill to amend the Exchange of Financial Account Information Act, a few amendments to the Companies Act number 7804 have been recommended by the Global Forum in order that Dominica become fully compliant to the criteria set by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Mr. Speaker, the forum has advised that the following be done by Dominica. 1, the provisions of the Companies Act which sets forth the conditions and procedures by which the court or the registrar of companies may restore a company which has been struck off the register are too limited. And also, Mr. Speaker, 2, that the time permitted for the companies to apply for restoration, that is to say, within a 20 years period of time for the publication of the Gazette that notified that the company had been struck off, is too extensive. As a result, Mr. Speaker, government proposes that the bill cited as Companies Amendment Act 2021, amendment to Section 443 of the Companies Act, by deleting the current subsection and replacing it with a new subsection 6, as well as adding new subsections, namely 6A, 6B, 6C, 6D, and 6E. Further, Mr. Speaker, Section 511 is amended by deleting subsection 5 and replacing it, Mr. Speaker, with a new subsection 5. And also, we are proposing to insert a new subsections, namely 6, 7, 8 in section 511. Mr. Speaker, these amendments to the Companies Act have been struck off the register. Mr. Speaker, with these amendments, companies that have been struck off the register and are aggrieved as a result will be able to apply for restoration within 5 years from the publication of the Gazette notified that the company had been struck off. The proposed amendment, Mr. Speaker, will also provide greater details and guidance to the court, the register of companies, and in terms of the conditions to be met and the procedures to be followed. Mr. Speaker, I now commend these very short amendments to the Companies Act to this Honorable House. Mr. Speaker, I do not assume that there's going to be any debate on this for this Honorable House. And this again, Mr. Speaker, is another statement of intent by your government to actually...
No, not yet.
Oh, sorry.
No, I thought you were just winding up. You're still on your feet. I was waiting for you to conclude. Okay.
Sorry.
The bill is before the House for debate.
Speaker, this government is so busy, you know, we have so much work to do. And of course, as I said just now, Mr. Speaker, this is not, it's just another statement of intent by your government to comply with international standards and to ensure that there's transparency within the governance structure of this beautiful country. This government is a government, Mr. Speaker, that adheres to the best practices as far as governance of this country is concerned. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Has been moved and seconded that the short titled Companies Amendment Act 2021 be read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Companies Amendment Act 2021.
The bill now stands committed to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause. House resumes. And I have to report that the bill shortly entitled Companies Amendment Act 2021 passed the committee stage without amendment. The question is that the report of the committee on the bill be adopted. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Honorable Blackmore, let's proceed. You need to speak on the mic. I don't know what's wrong with your mic. Oh yeah, it's on.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled the Company Act number 2021 be read a third time and pass.
Secondly.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Companies Amendment Act 2021 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Companies Amendment Act 2021.
The bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly.
I beg to move the second reading of the bill shortly entitled Dominica Hospitals Authority Act 2021.
Seconded.
Mr. Speaker, over the years, we have listened to the several concerns expressed by patients, the public, and various stakeholders regarding the quality of health services and challenges experienced at the Dominica China Friendship Hospital. Mr. Speaker, as a government who listens to the concerns of its people, great focus was placed on identifying and implementing measures that would help reduce or curb such concerns. Also recognizing that there is always room for improvement. On many occasions, Mr. Speaker, we have heard the Honorable Prime Minister speak of the need to review the management structure of the hospital to allow for more accountability. and therefore a National Health Commission, NHC, was appointed by Cabinet in 2017 to make recommendations on the improvement of the healthcare services in the Commonwealth of Dominica and to examine the governance structure and management of the Dominica-China Friendship Hospital. The Commission's mandate was directed to a strategic focus on improvement of care at that facility. The National Health Commission, in doing so, was mandated to examine what takes place in other countries where hospitals are managed by boards, all in an effort to bring more accountability of staff to the health sector. The Health Commission led the way with the review of existing bills, some of which will be presented to Parliament in the near future, and more importantly, the preparation of the Dominica Hospitals Authority DHA Bill 2021, which we are presenting here today. Mr. Speaker, the Dominica Hospitals Authority Bill 2021 is one of 5 pieces of legislation which is expected to drive the reform and transformation of hospitals and healthcare services with a strategic focus on strengthening accountability within an accreditation framework. Mr. Speaker, allow me to give some insight of how this Dominica Hospital Authority Bill was developed. With the National Health Commission in place, several consultations and discussions were conducted for the preparation of this bill. The Commission obtained the views and comments from various stakeholders and the public by embarking on a series of public sensitization and consultations through face-to-face interactions and also via Zoom. These consultations comprise 45 stakeholder groups and individuals, including the Honorable Prime Minister and the other members of Cabinet, the leader of the parliamentary opposition, and other parliamentarians as well. Consultations with hospital staff were also undertaken between September 29th and October 15th, 2020. The members of the National Health Commission met with well over 150 staff members of the Dominica-China Friendship Hospital, representing every category of worker in all departments and units to explain the bill and to hear their concerns. In addition to these, the National Health Commission engaged the Dominica Public Service Union, who had given written concerns. The National Health Commission responded to these written concerns, Mr. Speaker. The Dominica Public Health Union made comments that benefits such as study leave, sick leave, vacation, and departmental leave, as well as traveling allowance and security of tenure, may be taken away from those who are currently appointed. Mr. Speaker, I guarantee that this will not be the case. Staff who are currently employed are not going to lose their benefits. Mr. Speaker, the consultations which commenced in June 2020 and ended with a public radio simulcast and call-in program on September 15, 2020. Mr. Speaker, through the Zoom consultations, the Chief Parliamentary Counsel was present and assisted with the process. In Part 1 of the bill, it provides for the Dominica Hospitals Authority, referred to as DHA, and speaks to establishing the DHA as a body corporate. The functions of the authority, which are set out in Clause 5, includes the administration of designated health facilities to promote the welfare of patients and controlling, regulating, and administering all matters related to the management of such facilities. Mr. Speaker, this is to ensure the application of efficient and appropriate techniques, systems, standards, and models for the delivery of health care in these designated health facilities towards the goal of achieving international accreditation. With accreditation, there will be improved quality of care, better operational efficiency and processes, and ultimately increased confidence by the users of the healthcare facilities. Mr. Speaker, the new hospital legislation creates a modern, efficient approach to hospital care and to the development of health professionals through regular continuing education. The main goal of the reform is to ensure the Dominican populace receives a high quality of care from all public hospitals on the island. In Clause 6, the new law provides for the creation of a board of directors with a chief executive officer reporting to 9-member board. This is an effort to bring decision-making regarding patient care, diagnostic services, and procurement of equipment and supplies closer to the center of patient care. Clause 24 provides for the Chief Executive Officer to be appointed by the Minister on the recommendation of the Board. The CEO shall be responsible for the implementation of the policy and day-to-day management of the authority and for all operations at designated health facilities, as well as for the internal organization and administration of the authority. Mr. Speaker, there will be one person to hold accountable instead of the tripartite system of management which currently exists. The Board of Directors, which consists of 9 voting members appointed by the Minister of Health, are persons who possess special qualifications, substantial experience, or proven capacity in one or more of the fields of hospital administration, financing, medicine, law, nursing, economics, information communication technology, among other fields. Board members will also include representatives of the Dominica Medical Association and civil society. The Minister of Health will also appoint a chairperson and a deputy chairperson from the membership as previously mentioned. Mr. Speaker, the functions of the board as set out in Clause 7 of the DHA bill will be multifold. The board will be expected to coordinate the administration and operation of the authority and the designated health facilities, employ officers and determine the duties of such officers, make recommendations to the minister on the development of the authority, and to give effect of any directions given by the minister under Section 18. Clause 8 to 14 details delegation of functions of the board, duration of appointments, acting appointments, leave of absence, revocation of appointments, resignation, and remuneration for the board. Clause 18, Mr. Speaker, provides for the minister to give general directions as to policy to be followed by the board in the performance of its functions and exercise of its powers as appears necessary to the minister in the interest of the public. The board will, however, have the authority to appoint a secretary to the board, establish standing or special committees, and conduct meetings of the board as stated in clauses 19 to 21. As it relates to Part 2 of the Dominica Hospital Authority Bill, Mr. Speaker, clauses 24 to 37 provides for the senior management, other staff, and administration of the authority. The creation of a new structure to include new departments such as engineering services, quality management, patient support services, human resource and finance, and budgeting will also serve the enhancing the delivery of the quality of care in a modern 21st century hospital facility. The board shall appoint directors and managers which will be necessary for the authority to perform its function, and Mr. Speaker, this is provided for in clause 26. These directors or managers shall be full-time officers of the authority who shall not engage in any other trade, profession, or business without the consent of the board. The board, after consultation with the chief executive officer, will be able to employ specialists, consultants, and other persons to provide specific services or perform their specific tasks considered necessary for the performance of its function. The board will also be able to delegate in writing to the CEO the power to appoint, discipline, terminate employees, and to consent on the behalf of the board to the employees engaging in any trade, profession, occupation, or business. So, Mr. Speaker, this eliminates the fear that the staff can be fired if someone does not like them. There is a process for employing and terminating officers. Clause 13, Part 2, provides for the secondment of public officers. The bill provides for the preservation of staff benefits, and staff will have the opportunity to decide on their secondment to the new authority over a 2-year period. Part 3 of the bill, clauses 38 to 48, deals with financial matters, Mr. Speaker. The establishment of this authority is considered very essential, not only to improving delivery of healthcare systems and services, but also to the management of other limited financial resources. We are all aware that we speak of healthcare, we speak of incurring expenses. However, Mr. Speaker, this authority will also have borrowing powers and may, with the approval of the Minister responsible for finance, invest monies in securities to be determined by the board, thus generating income to sustain the operations of the authority. Provision has also been made to provide for auditing the accounts of the authority as stated in clause 44. the audited financial statements shall be prepared in accordance with international accounting standards. Mr. Speaker, the final part of the bill is Part 4, miscellaneous, in which clauses 48 to 54 provides for miscellaneous matters including the right of access to health records, confidentiality, as well as the recovery of fees initiated by the CEO after consultation with the board. Clause 52 would empower the board to make rules, and Clause 54 would empower the minister to make regulations for the purposes of the bill. Mr. Speaker, there has never been any intention or recommendation for the privatization of the hospitals. No one will be denied health care because of inability to pay for services or for any reason, and that non-discrimination clause has been embodied in the legislation and Clause 53, subsection 3. In summary, Mr. Speaker, the bill places emphasis on the use of the hospitals primarily for public purpose and requires the board to observe the high standards of transparency, financial management, and accountability in executing its functions. Mr. Speaker, let me make it abundantly clear that this bill is not intended to privatize the hospital. On the contrary, this bill guarantees the public right to health care and prohibits the making of any rules by the authority which would discriminate against any patients based on inability to pay. The top priorities include financial sustainability for the hospital and quality of care for the patients. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to express my deepest thanks to Professor Velma Newton, Regional Project Director of Caribbean Impact Justice Project at UWI Campus, Barbados, for assistance in drafting the bill. I would also like to commend and thank the National Health Commission for leading the way in preparation of this bill. Your commitments and dedication to the Dominica Hospital Authority bill will always be remembered. We also wish to thank all those who assisted in one way or another to help us in the completion of this legislative framework as a major step to realizing our goal of improving the quality of health care to the citizens of Dominica. Mr. Speaker, I present the bill Dominica Hospital Authority Act 21 to the House.
The bill is before the House for debate.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me first commend the Minister of Health for this extensive presentation and on this bill. In his presentation, the minister set forward or gave a clearly defined path of how we should take in doing major projects in our country in terms of our health. Dominica Hospitals Authority, how we go forward in implementing that authority. And he spoke about consultations with different stakeholders and getting the information back and forth. And that is commendable. And Mr. Speaker, that is why I have a little concern that I must raise in terms of health and health protocols. And according to this House, Mr. Speaker, earlier on you spoke about, make a very important point, asking about who is vaccinated or not for the next sitting. Something happened in this House, and we should not overlook it. No one is above the law, and everyone should respect protocols, no matter who you are. I traveled during the health pandemic, and I had to follow the protocols. Something happened on the weekend, Mr. Speaker. On Thursday, the Prime Minister was at the ALBA conference in Venezuela. High risk. Hold on, Mr. Speaker. We under health.
Member,
Yes,
member,
Mr.
hold on.
It's not irrelevant. It is not irrelevant for what is happening in this house. It is not irrelevant what is happening in this house. He's the Prime Minister. There were protocols, there are protocols set. It has a lot to do with respecting protocol. It has a lot to do, yes, hospital, health.
Honorable member.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Member, we are on a bill. On a bill. That's why I circulated the matter of relevance. I circulated this morning. Let me just read it for you. Member, I'm reading from Parliamentary Practice in New Zealand, third edition by David Maggie, Clerk of the House of Representatives. And I mean, I'm not going to read everything, but just on relevance, that's on page 185. The overriding, and that is relevance, the overriding principle as to what may be said is that all debate must be relevant to the question before the House. So I'm not going to read the entire material because all members were given a copy. But again, and another matter in regards to the standing order, if a member is not in the House, you cannot go and making speculative statement and the member is not there to defend. So I would ask you not to go down that road on two grounds. One, it will be speculative and the member is not in the House. And also, in regards to relevance, I'm not seeing the relevance of where you come in with that matter when we are discussing a bill. So focus on the bill, tell which clause under, and be guided by that. Please proceed, Honorable Member.
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier on, we are discussing the Dominica Hospital Authority bill, and I gave support to the guidelines, the concerns, the remarks made by the Honorable Minister of Health on how things proceeded. And I am guided, Mr. Speaker, but under that health discussion, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the different protocols and everything highlighted by the minister to that bill, I wanted to raise one concern in this House, Mr. Speaker, and I'm seeing that you don't want me to raise that concern, and it has to do with health protocols. And
member,
hold on, Mr. Speaker,
hold on. You can make a general statement, yes, but you cannot target an honorable member of this House in a personalized discussion.
Not personalized discussion.
So stick to the debate that matter, which is the health bill, and you can make any statement in regard to your health bill, but not targeting a member of this honorable House.
This bill, as I said before the House, and as the minister has spoken, raise some concerns and also put some concerns that we as Dominicans had to rest in terms of his presentation, in terms of reemployment, training, in terms of the structure of the different levels of management of the hospital authority. One of the concerns that I have, Mr. Speaker, is that we have too much power in the hands of the Minister of Health. If you look at the protocols and the different concerns raised, I see that as a concern, a genuine concern that we should look at addressing across the board in terms of the different levels, the Board of Directors, and the different delegation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this as well should open the opportunity for health providers to feel comfortable working in an environment where their employment and other benefits will be safeguarded, as the minister rightfully said. And that's why I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the presentation, even the bill, I have no problem with it, but I would like to see this be implemented, and going forward, we will have problems with the marginalization of some of our key stakeholders in terms of healthcare providers. Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier on, that the concern that really bothers me, and I want us to look at it, is the power of the minister. But the minister made a very important point in his presentation. And that point of accountability, that we should look across the board, not only under the health, in the health sector, but across the board, Mr. Speaker. We have that concern, and we have been raising even this morning during the discussion. That was a concern in terms of accountability, transparency in this House among members, and giving members the opportunity to raise genuine concerns. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, this is the way forward. Capital, major project, authorities, consultation allow us on either side of the aisle to make our contribution, even though they are not taken up, but at least we get the opportunity to make a contribution towards the said bill and towards the said authority, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the minister made another important point: quality of health care to our citizens. And I take pause on this one, Mr. Speaker, because I have been raising that concern in Parliament. Quality of health care to the citizens of Salisbury. Mr. Speaker, we are still without an additional nurse at the Salisbury Health Center. We have over 3,000 people, where the ratio is supposed to be 1,000 to 1. And that is a concern that I have raised with the minister one-on-one. I've raised in Parliament. This is my third time raising it in Parliament. And I'm trying to understand why that situation has been prolonged and it is not being addressed. What is the delay? Why we do not have enough extra nurses in Salisbury? Why it is an issue? And nobody has taken up the opportunity to answer that question they do not have to answer me, but answer the people of Salisbury. Give them a reason why. Give the nurse who has been overworked at the Salisbury Health Center, Nurse Magdalene Moses, a reason why she's been overworked, serving over 3,000 people. And that falls on this health authority going forward. How do we manage our staff? How do we ensure that we have the proper human resource in the different communities providing quality primary health care? And that is a concern for a lot of us, not only in Salisbury, but across the board, where you have, and I'm sure the minister, a member for Parliament for Bells, will agree with me on this one as well. That is a concern in Bells. When I raised that concern in Parliament, I got 2 calls from Bells, and they would tell me they have that same concern as well. You know, it has to be workers. Anybody can be workers, but there are Dominicans who had concerns, and that is important. They don't have, even though they're workers or laborers, but Dominicans who have genuine health concerns, Mr. Ostry, the member for Cottage. Yes, you know, I'll call your name. So these are the things we like to see going forward, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, as I wind up on this matter, on this bill, my concern I wanted to raise earlier on has to deal, it falls under health as well. Protocols, we should all follow protocols. And that concern I have, Mr. Speaker, that there is a 24 hours, not concerning every, and I'm not speaking about one person, I'm not speaking about we generally, that when we travel there's a mandatory 48 hours in quarantine, even though you're fully vaccinated. You can go on the government website and you can get this, Mr. Speaker. If you're fully vaccinated, you have to follow the protocol as well, Mr. Speaker. And it says quarantine and testing. And it says fully vaccinated travelers shall be transported to quarantine at a government-operated quarantine facility or a managed experience at a safe in nature certified properly for a minimum of 2 days. Mr. Speaker, that is my concern. That is a concern, a genuine one. And every member in this House should be concerned. You raised a very important point earlier on about asking people who are vaccinated. This has to be addressed in this House, Mr. Speaker. Anybody who travel has to do the quarantine. Everybody who comes home. There are people who were told they have to spend 4 days. In Parliament, they spend 5 days or 6 days. Mr. Speaker, I understand as I wind up on this one, I want to say I give support in whole to this health authority, this hospital authority bill before the House. And I hope in that is not talk, but they will be implemented in the best interests of each and every Dominican as we move forward, Mr. Speaker, to ensuring that we have proper health care for every citizen of the Commonwealth of Dominica. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't intend to speak on the bill before the House, Mr. Speaker. But in all circumstances, Mr. Speaker, I have to say a few words, Mr. Speaker. And in beginning my presentation, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to make it abundantly clear that this Roosevelt-Skerrit-led Labour Party administration, Mr. Speaker, has to go down as the best regime when it comes to the improvement of health care in Dominica's history, Mr. Speaker. In Dominica's history, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as I speak about history, Mr. Speaker, it is the United Workers' Party, when they were in government, who implemented the user fees, Mr. Speaker, on the backs of the Dominican people. Let us remember that, I didn't intend to speak, Mr. Speaker, because our record of improvement, of health care in this country is clear, Mr. Speaker. At a time when we are seeing unprecedented development in the healthcare sector, the brilliant Minister for Health is coming here with a bill that everyone in Dominica and every representative in here of the people should support in furtherance of the continued healthcare upliftment of the people of this country. Mr. Speaker, we heard the sad lamentations of the member for the Salisbury constituency. And really, what he said and nothing, Mr. Speaker. On an important piece of legislation like that, Mr. Speaker, an important piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, when the China Friendship Hospital development is in its fourth phase of transformation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have trained more local specialists than anywhere else in the sub-region, not only in Dominica. Almost every, and are subject to correction, almost every specialist, health specialist, Mr. Speaker, at the China Friendship Hospital today was trained by this Roosevelt-Skerrit-led Dominica Labour Party. That is where we have to be, Mr. Speaker. That is where we have to be. And I always remember the Prime Minister recounting that it was on one of his house-to-house visits, I believe, in the Kalinago territory, and he was speaking to an ailing Kalinago brother, I believe, an aged Kalinago brother, who was telling him that they could hardly afford the user fee at the hospital. And he, although he was sick, he was afraid to go back to the hospital because they couldn't pay the bills. Mr. Speaker, we had pregnant mothers, Mr. Speaker, who were afraid to go to have their babies at the hospital, Mr. Speaker, in the latter part of the 1990s, 97, 98, because they were afraid of the hospital user fees. Mr. Speaker, today we have built how many? 6 health and wellness centers. We have 9 going, and there are more to come, Mr. Speaker, and 3 more to come. That is where we should be going with this debate on this, Mr. Speaker, Dominica Hospitals Authority. We are putting the system in place for the better management, Mr. Speaker, of the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, because this hospital is a state-of-the-art hospital. I remember again the same opposition when the Prime Minister mentioned a piece of equipment called the HIFU equipment. They say it's food, the Prime Minister food. It's not HIFU he's talking about. But and lo and behold, the same opposition is seeing, Mr. Speaker, that this piece of equipment is in fact implemented in the China Friendship Hospital today for the use of the people. Mr. Speaker, we have CT scans in the hospital. We should be heralding in the passage of this bill, where our citizens do not have to go to Martinique and Guadeloupe and Trinidad and spend thousands of dollars. That money will stay right here at home, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about times when our citizens died because we did not have an intensive care unit at the hospital. This government made it possible for lives to be saved right here at home because of the intensive care unit, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and I await the contribution of the member for the Marigot constituency, because the new Marigot District Health and Wellness and Hospital, Mr. Speaker, state-of-the-art edifice that is about to be opened in the Marigot Health District is a wonder not only for the people in that district, but every single Dominican, we should say with pride and joy. But that is where we should be on the debate, Mr. Speaker, and we have heard our citizens, Mr. Speaker. So what we're trying to do is just to bring better management and better control and more efficiency and more predictability, Mr. Speaker, to the delivery of healthcare at our top institution called the China Friendship Hospital. That is what we're trying to do here, Mr. Speaker. But every single move this government makes to improve the lives of the people of this country, Mr. Speaker, the opposition is against it, Mr. Speaker. Every single one. That is why I love to ask for divisions in this House, because I want the record to show, Mr. Speaker, that this government will continue. We will continue with the development of this country in healthcare, in education, in infrastructure, notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, that we do not have the support of all of the members of this House and the members on the other side. Continue. I mean, Mr. Speaker, we heard the member for Salisbury, and what's new, Mr. Speaker? What's new? Mr. Speaker, I welcome the passage of the Dominica Hospitals Authority Bill. Mr. Speaker, I speak on behalf of all of my constituents and, in fact, all of Dominica, Mr. Speaker, when we say that the record of this government in healthcare is unprecedented, not only in Dominica, but in the English-speaking sub-region, Mr. Speaker. I thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give full support to the timely and important bill, the Dominica Hospitals Authority. And, Mr. Speaker, I actually clapped when the honorable member of Salisbury finished his presentation, because I realized he was talking only about Salisbury when we're talking about the hospital authority, not health centers. And it's very disturbing that an important bill, seeing the challenges we've had in the management and in service delivery at the hospital, the member chose to spend the time he had in Parliament to talk about the health protocols and Salisbury. But, Mr. Speaker, this government takes the welfare of its citizens very seriously, and that is why we have introduced this bill today. And if it's one thing this Dominica Labour Party government is very guilty of, is ensuring that when we do things in this country, whether infrastructure, we do it with pride and we do it to the best of our abilities. That is why today we have a state-of-the-art hospital, and it shall be one of the best in our region, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to reference some concerns that this bill particularly addresses. One of the major concerns you heard every day, Mr. Speaker, that we can have the best infrastructure, but the service delivery is dependent on the people, the staff. And whereas we have some very good nurses and doctors, we know that there are some that the service delivery needs to be improved. And one of the measures I want to highlight to the people, especially many Dominicans, even my constituents, that it addresses is that of delivery of service, in terms that there will be the clinical committee which shall assist the board with respect to the matters relating to clinical governance, including clinical standards, quality management, risk management, and patients' complaints. So you see, the patients will have an opportunity, if they have an issue, a complaint, that there will be a committee that they can report this to, Mr. Speaker. And they will also be hiring the director. There will be a director of clinical services. And the responsibility of that person is to ensure and monitor the quality of medical care at designated health facilities, ensure the achievement of continuing quality improvement in all aspects of medical care at designated health facilities, and the employment and allocation of medical staff to clinical departments of the authority and perform other duties. I wanted to highlight that to the citizens to show that we took time to really craft this bill. I really want to thank the interim board and the other contributors of this bill. You can see it was well done to address every concern raised by the citizens of our country. And I further want to support my honorable colleague Douglas, that because of the passage of this bill and the investments we've made in healthcare, especially in the hospital, and the expansion of services that will be offered, including the HIFU machine that was so talked about. I heard you can use it for cosmetic surgery as well. And so you never know how other services that will be offered in terms of cosmetic surgery development in Dominica. That's an opportunity. Yes. And so it gives rise to health tourism. No longer will we be seeing people traveling out of Dominica for health services. People will be coming to our country for health services, Mr. Speaker. So it will add to health tourism, and that is an important sector that I look forward to further developing with the Minister of Health. So there, yes. So there are tremendous benefits, but also opportunities for our people as the establishment of this new health authority. We will oversee the management and the functions of our hospitals to ensure that service delivery is at its best in our country. That when people come here, they can say, yes, this country has the best services in the region. And that is our goal. In everything this government has done, this Roosevelt Skerrit-led administration, is to ensure that our citizens can stand proud in any country. Not the days like before that people used to say, Dominica is last Kakarat. We are moving towards being the first in every sector: education, health, tourism, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, and I give my full support to this bill.
Mr. Speaker, I too rise just to give a brief contribution to this very important bill before the House. I think it would be remiss of me, first and foremost, as a medical doctor by training, if I did not stand to give support to this very important measure before the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is yet another very progressive measure that this government is undertaking as it pertains to health care to its citizens. And the speakers before me would have alluded to all of the important investments that we're making in health. They talk about the two major hospitals, the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, to the tune of 130-somebody million EC dollars. And we see this hospital, in spite of the critics, Mr. Speaker, and what we like to call the enemies of progress, talking so negatively, Mr. Speaker, about the hospital, especially in its initial phases, where we ventured to construct a new hospital on an existing site, Mr. Speaker. The naysayers said all sorts of stuff that this wouldn't happen, and of course they were hoping that this project would be a failure, Mr. Speaker. But right now, Minister of Health, I think we're well into the phase 5 or 6 of this major project, Mr. Speaker. And pretty soon, Mr. Speaker, by the end of this year, early next year, we should see the completion of all phases of this important piece of infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. The Northeast Hospital, Mr. Speaker, I call it the Northeast Hospital. I don't want to call it a Marigot Hospital, because it's going to serve the entire northeast of the island, and of course, our soon-come new international airport, Mr. Speaker. Again, another very important piece of infrastructure to provide health care to the people of the Northeast, and of course, the wider population by extension, Mr. Speaker. Major investments we've seen in health. In addition to these 2 major hospitals, we've also seen a number of health centers being built around the island, Mr. Speaker. Climate-proof, climate-resilient health structures, Mr. Speaker, in a number of the rural communities. I have been blessed as a member of Parliament for the Pilit-Servan constituency to be blessed with 2 of these structures, Mr. Speaker. One in Bagatelle, soon to be officially opened, and another that had already been commissioned in the Belleville-Chopin community, Mr. Speaker. Of course, to serve the existing Belleville-Chopin and the new, former Pilit-Servan residents. A very up-and-coming city, Mr. Speaker, in Dominica. A number of other health centers in the rural community, Mr. Speaker, climate-proof health centers. In addition to this, Mr. Speaker, we've seen other major investment as it pertains to the increase of our budget, our pharmaceutical procurement budget, Mr. Speaker. $1 million, Mr. Speaker, added to our recurrent budget in order to provide for the central medical supplies, the hospital, Mr. Speaker, to be able to procure much life-saving drugs, especially for cancer and other ailments, Mr. Speaker. Drugs that otherwise, prior to this investment, Mr. Speaker, they would have to now purchase sometimes at the private pharmacies, etc. But, Mr. Speaker, this is no surprise. We've seen our track record in health as a government, and the ongoing, Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 pandemic has shown just that, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able to put our money where our mouth is, and the results speak for themselves, Mr. Speaker. Our tremendous handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've been blessed, Mr. Speaker. We've been blessed with a very solid Minister of Health, Mr. Speaker, a very proficient health practitioner at the helm of the Ministry of Health, together with his staff, Mr. Speaker. And I think Dominica, when the issue is written, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Health and the Ministry of Health, together with the government extension, Mr. Speaker, will go down in the history books as it pertains to handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, we've always said that the infrastructure and the purchase of state-of-the-art equipment and stuff would not cut it, Mr. Speaker. Because if you do not see a change in the structure, a change in the work ethics, Mr. Speaker, or change in the administrative structure of the health system in Dominica, Mr. Speaker, all of these major investments, the net effect would be equal to 0, or probably negative, Mr. Speaker. In other words, it would be like putting new wine into old bottles, or whatever it is that the phrase says, Mr. Speaker. We've seen an increase in the training of medical doctors, both at the general practitioner level and also the specialists, Mr. Speaker. A number of specialist disciplines. Never before in the history of Dominica have we seen these sons and daughters of the soil, Mr. Speaker, trained in specialist services in Dominica. We talk about cardiologists, Mr. Speaker, nephrologists, you just name it. Right now, Dominicans who have gone overseas to train have returned and are returning to serve this new hospital. So, Mr. Speaker, as you can see, it's not just a Vicky plan of just doing things, Mr. Speaker. This government has been on a very progressive trail towards improving the healthcare system in Dominica. And this measure, as I said, is just another way in which we're going to enforce. We have had the infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. We have the personnel. Because as I was saying, you recall as a former Minister of Health, I've always said that these nice, beautiful structures and the state-of-the-art equipment would not cut it, Mr. Speaker. We're going to have to need the personnel, both quantum and quality of the personnel, and in addition, of course, the administrative structure to make sure that these facilities are well equipped and well run, Mr. Speaker. So as a medical doctor, first and foremost, I'm Minister of Health, Mr. Speaker, sorry, for you, and of course as a former Minister of Health, Mr. Speaker, because this bill has been on the cards for quite a while, and I want to commend the current Minister of Health for finally bringing this bill to Parliament. After much consultation, I heard the member of Salisbury who I think for the very first time in a long time I've heard him said something positive, you know, that there was a lot of consultation, which I think was augurs well for the future management, Mr. Speaker, of the Ministry of Health and the country. Lots of consultation. So even this bill, Mr. Speaker, you would have heard on social media and other form of media, lots of talk about this bill and I was going to disadvantage doctors, etc., etc. So while yes, there might be certain things that would tighten up, Mr. Speaker, certain clauses in the bill that would tighten up the delivery of health care, and I think this is what the country needs at this time, Mr. Speaker, the tightening up and accountability, Mr. Speaker, of all health services, and especially healthcare services where we deal in the human health and human life, Mr. Speaker. So I full-heartedly support this bill before the House, Mr. Speaker, and again, kudos to the Minister of Health and, of course, the government by bringing this bill to the House, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable King, I recognize you. You can proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give a short contribution to the bill before the House, the Dominica Hospital Authority bill. But before I do so, please permit me to express sympathies to the Laville family, Mr. Christopher Laville, and his children on the passing of Mrs. Jennifer Laville. And I choose to do so here because Mrs. Laville was a very important member of the community since she worked at the hospital, at the lab as a lab technologist for several years. And she also owned a private lab, the Quality Diagnostic. She passed on Saturday, and I just wanted to express my sympathies. Mr. Speaker, I give full support to the Dominica Hospital Authority Act 2021. It has come at a time very timely, and it goes to show that this Labour Party government is very serious about health care here in Dominica. I wish to commend all the people who took part in bringing the bill so far. As you know, it is very detailed and great work has been done on it. I want to especially congratulate the Honorable Prime Minister for his usual leadership in such things. I also wish to commend the work done by the former Minister of Health, Honorable Daru, and the present Minister of Health, Honorable Dr. Irvin McIntyre. Special commendation goes to the Health Commission, Dr. Shillingford and his team. I know they worked well, they consulted with all levels of the public, professional, members of parliament, among others, and I just say excellent work, congratulations. I have been exposed to the health and the management organization at the previous Princess Margaret Hospital, now the Dominica China Friendship Hospital. And for years, both the doctors, the nurses, the staff at the hospital, and the public were a bit confused about the management of that institution, because we had the medical part on one side with doctors, then we headed by the hospital medical director, then you had the nurses headed by the matron, on the other side lab reporting directly to the Ministry of Health, then you had another hospital authority administration. So whenever you had meetings, you didn't have one complete body being responsible for the hospital. So it became necessary to have a hospital authority. And this is why we are here today, to bring this act here. So I'm very, very excited about that. There have been a lot of concerns, and I heard the Minister of Health alluded to them, in terms of that putting a board in place was to privatize the hospital. I want to assure Dominicans that is not the intention at all. We will continue to be a public hospital. We will continue to take care of our most vulnerable among us. And incidentally, I'm the minister responsible for the most vulnerable among us. So for the elderly, for the youth, for the persons with disability, I want to ensure them that nobody, absolutely nobody, will be denied care at the hospital. Whether it be the Dominica China Friendship Hospital or our brand new hospital, the Northeast Hospital in the constituency of Marigot. Mr. Speaker, healthcare for some time, thanks to this Dominica Labour Party administration, has been free for children 18 and under, and for the elderly 60 and above, and this will remain as it is, free healthcare for the people in this age group. Also, it remains true that any child requiring to travel overseas for healthcare, there is already a facility in place at the Dominica Social Security for that purpose, put in place by this Labour Party administration, and this remains the same. Mr. Speaker, I couldn't help but be amazed by the statement made by the member of Salisbury. He was concerned about the powers that the Minister of Health had. Could you believe? Mr. Speaker, I was a young lab technician at the Princess Margaret Hospital when the United Workers' Party government Mr. Speaker, I will answer the member, but now let me, I shall remain on point. Yes. Mr. Speaker, at the time that the UWP government was in power, the Princess Margaret Hospital was known as the St. Joseph and Salisbury Hospital. Do you know why? I sure we know why. Because the Minister of Health at the time ensured that she decided who was employed and who was not employed. Mr. Speaker, it was the then Minister of Health under the UWP government who decided that I should not get appointed because I was too rude for not supporting her party. Mr. Speaker, this authority actually removes some of the power from the Minister of Health, and that's a fact. So I just want to ensure my brother, he's my brother from Salisbury, the member of Salisbury, that the powers are actually being removed from the Minister of Health by this Labour Party government. Also, Mr. Speaker, I went to study in Cuba to become a medical doctor in September of 2000 by this Dominica Labour Party government. Mr. Speaker, 2 days after getting to Cuba, we received the news of the death of our then Prime Minister. I cried like a baby. I was sent here by the administration led by Honorable Rosie Douglas. And I am proud to say that today, because of him, I'm a doctor today. Mr. Speaker, it is the same Dominica Labour Party administration who decided that there were too many foreign specialists in our hospital.
And in the last couple years, we have sent several doctors to specialize in several areas. Mr. Speaker, our 2 Kalinago surgeons were trained in Cuba under this Dominica Labour Party to become surgeons. Mr. Speaker, the relevance is to let the people know that this Dominica Labour Party continues to make strides in healthcare, and this is just one of the ways that we have made strides. Mr. Speaker, we are also going to continue with our infrastructural development. You will notice that this hospital authority will also be responsible for our new structure, which will soon open in Marigot. I hope to see my friend, the honorable leader of the opposition, at this opening. I know he'll be there. And I know very soon, by the end of this year or the beginning of next year, we shall open our Dominica Friendship Hospital. This is why we are putting this authority in place. Mr. Speaker, I'm excited because the members of the board will be well-rounded. So we will have a representation. According to the Act, it says that 6 persons possessing special qualifications in the area of finance, hospital administration, management, law, medicine, nursing, economic science, engineering, and industrial relations. Also, we will have membership of the Dominica Medical Association, one who is not employed by the authority. We will also have a person with knowledge and experience in information communications technology and a representative of civil society. Also, as ex-officio non-voting members, we will have the Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Medical Officer, and a Director of Clinical Services. So we will have a board in place to take care of the management of the hospital. There will be more clear, there will be a clear path as to the management structure, and we will also have people representing the public, so if they have any concerns, so if our honorable member says we have concerns, there will be a committee in place that he can go to. So we are doing good, and we're heading forward. I would like to also thank the Prime Minister for all the work he has been doing in the primary healthcare sector. I know Minister talk about I almost call him a minister. The honorable member talk about bells. I assure you that bells is secure. We have a nurse and we have a community health aide, thanks to this Dominica Labour Party government. Okay, so don't be concerned. We are in safe hands, and soon, apart from the 12 hospitals, the 12 health centers that we are building, we're also going to build 3 additional in Anzime, in Roseau, and in St. Joseph. So I say healthcare is on the path of success. We have done well, and this Dominica Labour Party administration will continue to do even more. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is, having listened to Dr. King, I think we should consider this a bit over for impartial contribution to the debate. I associate myself, Mr. Speaker, with everything that the Minister of Health contributed to the Parliament this morning in his introduction of the bill. I want to specially recognize and to express my personal thanks, profound thanks, and of course that of the government and the entire country, to the members of the Commission, the members who spearheaded this process. And it speaks to their undying commitment and love for our country. They are all largely retired people who have served this country in different capacities for several decades. But recognizing that they want to contribute a contribution, volunteered to be part of this commission. And this is what the nation needs. People with talent and skills who are concerned about the welfare and well-being of our country and bringing those skills and talents to the center for the greater good of all. It is not people who are sitting and criticizing but make no contribution to the development of Dominica. And I speak here, Mr. Speaker, of one of the greatest Dominicans this country has produced in the person of Dr. Dorian Shillingford. Dr. Dorian Shillingford, at his age, continues to make a meaningful contribution to Dominica's development, particularly in healthcare. And I believe every single Dominican owes this gentleman and his family a debt of gratitude for so many years of service to Dominica, and his passion and his love and his determination. Words will never be able to express my personal gratitude to him and, of course, the gratitude of the nation. I speak of His Excellency Elwood Williams, our former president, you know, who got so immersed in this process, committing himself and his intellectual capacity and his knowledge to advancing the improvement of the delivery of healthcare and the management of healthcare services in Dominica. I speak here of Mrs. Jennifer Astafan, a distinguished daughter of the soil, who persevered and ensured that her knowledge and her skills and her talent were placed at the disposal of the people of Dominica. And working several long hours and going deeper into the health system and understanding what needs to be done to ensure that current and future generations can have access to more improved and better delivered healthcare services in our country. I speak of Dr. Donald Peters, someone who has made a tremendous contribution to healthcare. Dr. Peters, before he went out to study at university, worked in the Ministry of Health. And I believe that he would, I mean, he's an old guy now, he likes to play young and so on, but he's an old guy, Mr. Speaker, whose intellectual capacity is really second to none. And his understanding of healthcare management and making changes in the system. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, if he was about 20 years younger now, back in his days, he would have been a master candidate for the CEO of the hospital. A master candidate. Someone who went out, made a mark for himself, and contributed dramatically to many students having access to tertiary education at every university where he worked, including myself. And came back and is making his contribution. He is not there on Facebook, Mr. Speaker, or on a talk show criticizing the country. No. He's working diligently to make life better for every single citizen in Dominica. And these are the kinds of characters we need in Dominica. These are the people we need in Dominica who are serious about Dominica. And I speak here of Mrs. Cecilia Martin. Easygoing but very solid individual, intellectually, academically, and her profound knowledge of human resource management and management generally, coming there and diligently making their contribution. We would not have been here today had it not been for these people, Mr. Speaker. And we speak here of Miss Cheryl Roll, known for her background in insurance, who came and brought her knowledge about insurance, especially as we are concerned about our citizens having health insurance, because the reality is healthcare across the world has dramatically increased and is super expensive, Mr. Speaker. And then we speak here of Sister Henry. I know her Sister Henry. What's her first name again? Joan, Sister Joan Henry, a former nurse, who in her usual prayerful way comes forth and makes a contribution and bringing her background in nursing and nursing management to the table. And I speak here of Dr. Ruby Blanc, a young Dominican who continues to make a positive contribution to the current day management and delivery of healthcare services in Dominica. Dominicans, Mr. Speaker, working together for the common good. And so I want the records of this Parliament in a very profound and clear manner to herald the contributions of these people to this process, the members of the Health Commission. And of course, with secretarial services from Mrs. Zamo, diligent public officer in her time, and even currently so. And I want to also specially recognize, because I think one of the persons who is an unsung person in the public service who works diligently is the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, Miss Pearl Xavier. This skill is very uncommon, is very rare, but she continues in a diligent, professional way, providing parliamentary drafting advice to this country. And I want to also recognize her contribution to the process. And to all the nurses and doctors and professionals who made their contribution, one way or the other, towards this bill. Mr. Speaker, I have heard criticisms that the Minister for Health has too many powers in respect to this legislation, in respect to this bill. The country must understand very clearly that the government is not here today in the Parliament to delegate its responsibility of the provision of healthcare services to our citizens. That's a fundamental responsibility of the government. And this government has taken this responsibility very, very seriously, and in a practical and pragmatic manner has gone about improving the healthcare of our country. Not only the infrastructure, which is unprecedented, but ensuring that we have the human resources at our disposal. Ensuring that we have the equipment at our disposal. So what we're doing here, Mr. Speaker, is essentially delegating to an authority, a statutory authority, the responsibility of the management oversight of our hospitals in Dominica. The management oversight, the Minister for Health and the government still retain the fundamental responsibility of the provision of healthcare services to our citizens. And Mr. Speaker, this has been part of a master plan, as the Honourable Member for Portsmouth, Honourable Minister for Trade, Honourable Douglas indicated. This is not a part of a jigsaw puzzle, no, it is part of a plan. And we have systematically gone about, Mr. Speaker, in improving the healthcare in our country. When COVID-19 came about, Mr. Speaker, we were the first country in the Caribbean, outside of Carrefour based in Trinidad, who could test for COVID-19. Our lab was at the threshold of being certified by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control of the United States government, and PAHO. Ahead of the game, so to speak, Mr. Speaker. There has been dramatic improvement in the healthcare of our country. I was totally dumbfounded, Mr. Speaker, when I got to know when I became Prime Minister that we did not have an ICU in Dominica. And I went about as the Prime Minister and I spoke to President Castro, may his soul rest in peace, and I spoke to President Chavez. And President Castro provided the human resources, and President Chavez provided the equipment. And we set up the ICU. And we also set up improved infrastructure, additional infrastructure. We could have done all of the blood work in Portsmouth, which never happened before. X-rays could have been done in Portsmouth. And I'm hoping that the authority can go back to these days when we can provide those services in Portsmouth for the Portsmouth Health District. Because there's no reason why if somebody gets a minor fracture, they have to come to Roseau. And so we continue to invest, Mr. Speaker. When we came in as a government, there was one dysfunctional dialysis machine. Today, we have over 12 state-of-the-art machines that those who are receiving that dialysis treatment and the nurses and doctors who are providing the service speak so glorifully about, Mr. Speaker. Our hope and prayer is that Dominicans will take care of themselves, because really what we are preaching is more preventive medicine rather than a cure or treatment. And so this, Mr. Speaker, is good news. I think the advent of the Dominica China Friendship Hospital, and I just to say to you, Mr. Speaker, my only issue with the Dominica China Friendship Hospital is its location. My vision for the healthcare and for the delivery of tertiary and secondary healthcare in Dominica was to have established this hospital in Warner and to create this wellness place where you have trees and and a park, and you can see the ocean, and create this massive facility, and we would have had the helipad there and so forth, and then transform the PMH into a center of excellence for primary health care. Yes. But in a democracy, the leader doesn't always get what he wants, Mr. Speaker. But that's spilled milk. That notwithstanding, we have at the Dominica China Friendship Hospital a top-class facility. A top-class facility. And even when we speak about the high machine, I hear people criticizing it. Instead, they thank God for this and to big up the country, they criticize it, making all sorts of jokes about it. I saw a doctor saying that when somebody got sick, oh, where's this carried high flow machine? You know, we don't play games with these things, Mr. Speaker. And with the theater, I have met doctors who are out of themselves, of the quality of the theaters and the number of theaters that we have. You know, there was a child pacemaker that was put in. Dr. McIntyre is working now, and at some point he'll give details on this, with International University to collaborate with us on this program of pacemakers in Dominica. And we're going to recognize the Chinese government and having the Chinese expert here, and also Dr. Andrew, who is a product of this party in this government. There are some 20 nurses that will be employed very soon, some who graduated from the State College and some who graduated from All Saints University. They have passed the regional exams, and we'll be engaging them very soon, about 20 or 22 of them. The minister have given me some directions that he can go ahead and employ them. We'll make the funds available to employ them. What we need now in Dominica, Mr. Speaker, is for us to recognize that this is our country, that we're serving ourselves, we're serving our brothers and sisters, and we must maintain the highest professional ethics in respect to the delivery of services. Because I say to people, today, you are the one administering the care. Tomorrow you have to receive it. And how would you like to be treated when you're on the receiving end? And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize the Health Commission, to recognize the efforts of the former Minister of Health, Dr. Daru, and the current Minister of Health, Dr. McIntyre, and to the entire Cabinet for its leadership and guidance to this process. It has been a journey, but I believe we're nearing the end of that journey. The government, the party, this government is playing its part by putting the infrastructure in place, both the physical infrastructure, the legal infrastructure, the human resources infrastructure in place. These are our responsibilities. I am not the one who is going to give injections at the hospital and to dress sores. That's not my responsibility. And so I believe this act, this piece of legislation was well drafted. It took everything into consideration. I heard concerns about the current staff, people who are employees of the state. They will be given an opportunity to exercise their options, whether they want to stay with the government as employees of the state or they want to go as employees of the authority. And if they decide to stay with the government, then they'll be seconded, as we have done at the State College. And then you give, after this, everybody who is employed will be employed by the authority, Mr. Speaker. And one of the reasons why I support this approach of the management of the hospitals in Dominica is that I find it totally unacceptable, because healthcare is so fluid and so urgent that the issue of procurement of medicines and procurement of supplies should not have to go through the whole administrative bureaucratic process of having to go all the way to the ministry for, even if they have to buy a little something. So my view is this: let us put the resources that Parliament would vote for this authority and put it at the disposal of the authority so that we can have access to the funds much quicker than we currently have. And so the delivery and the management of healthcare can certainly be improved, Mr. Speaker. And for us, as a government that espouses a socialist principle of looking after people, this is why education and healthcare, these are areas that no government at any period of our history can counter in terms of our delivery and our commitment to these things, Mr. Speaker. None. But we do so at the service of the people of Dominica. And one of the things I would like to encourage Dominicans to is to get health care insurance. Get health insurance. Get health insurance. We cannot go and buy a motor car that costs $100,000 or $1,000 and not have health insurance. Let us make the sacrifice, because health care across the world is becoming increasingly expensive. We have had the pilot program, the government working in collaboration with the Dominica Social Security, but we need to ensure that Dominicans access healthcare insurance, and so that we can have health coverage for all. The point that has been made about the control of the minister, one of the things, Member for Salisbury, you have to understand why it is so important for the Minister for Health to have this ministerial portfolio oversight and control of the healthcare is that you do not want to have a situation where you delegate the authority of the board to put in fees, user fees, and they go, they say they become a pro-council viceroy, and they know the governors of the hospital, and they can do what they want and indifferent to the reality confronting the citizens of Dominica, and put user fees that people cannot afford to pay. So they have to get the approval of the minister if they have to introduce any kind of fee structure or something there, Mr. Speaker, so that we can have a better appreciation for these things. So I really support this. I'm excited about this. There are other pieces of legislation that will come. The medical professionals bill, the pharmacy bill will come, Mr. Speaker. There are other pieces of legislation that will come that will all part of a suite of legislation that will help improve the management, the oversight, the delivery, the transparency, the accountability issues in respect to healthcare. And I think today, Mr. Speaker, at the end of this debate in this House, the healthcare in Dominica will be in a much better place than it was yesterday because of the advent of this. Now it is left to us, and I'm hoping that the authority, I'm hoping that the board can have the same kind of temperament, the same kind of understanding, the same kind of appreciation, the same kind of love and concern that the commissioners have displayed in bringing us this far, Mr. Speaker, in respect to this authority and the number of attendant benefits that this approach would bring to Dominica. So we're not privatizing healthcare. I would never sit in a cabinet. Whether I am Prime Minister or Minister, I would never sit in cabinet, Mr. Speaker. That would cause a government to privatize the delivery of healthcare in a country. No, never. I believe fundamentally that healthcare must remain in the hands of the state and the public. because we must ensure, Mr. Speaker, that every one of our citizens and residents has access to health care. And health care and top-class health care. So the construction of the Marigot Hospital, Mr. Speaker, the construction of so many health centers, and of course, we'll be constructing one in Cottage, there'll be one in Roseau Central for the Roseau Health District. St. Joe, we cannot talk about resilience, and the number of times that we have fixed St. Joe Health Center. I have said to the Minister for the Power Rep there and the Minister for Health that we need a new site and to build a modern facility for the St. Joseph Health District, Mr. Speaker, so that we can have improvement. I don't want to cross no Raven to go in a health center in St. Joseph. We have to find a proper of land and to build a state-of-the-art health center for the residents
10 more
of
minutes.
St. Joe, Mr. Speaker. I don't need more 10 minutes,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, because we need to move approval so that we can improve health care. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. But while I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House be adjourned, suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the House be suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.